At 270 meters underwater in absolute darkness, he found a body that had been there for 10 years. No one could reach it. No one could bring it back. Then Dave Shaw made a promise to the dead boy's parents. That promise killed him. Northern Cape, South Africa, a place where nothing should survive. Red semi-desert, bare rocks scorched to a single color, wind passing through and taking nothing with it. The kind of place that has a name on a map but no reason for anyone to come. And then the ground opens. No marker, no fence, no warning. Just a gap. Easy to walk past without looking down. Below the gap, water. Below that, darkness. Below that, no one knew. This is Bushman's Hole, the third deepest freshwater cave on Earth. Drop in and you sink, you keep sinking. When your feet finally find the floor, you are 283 meters below the surface. The height of a 93-story building, driven straight down into the earth. But the depth alone doesn't explain what makes this place so lethal. The shape does. A vertical shaft straight down. No passages, no slopes, no way to navigate sideways. Inside, there is only up and down. Light dies at 30 meters. Below, that comes darkness, so complete you can hold your hand in front of your face and see nothing. Below 200 meters, water temperature holds at 11 degrees Celsius year-round. At that depth, hypothermia overtakes you before drowning gets the chance. At that depth, no accident can be corrected, not one. Bushman's Hole is not a place for exploration. It is a place that keeps what it claims. It had already claimed someone. In 1994, his name was Deon Dreyer. 20 years old, South African, an amateur diver who came with friends and wanted to go a little deeper than before. Nobody stopped him. Nobody knew how deep he would go. Search teams entered the water. They found nothing. Deon's body stayed at the bottom for 10 years, 270 meters down. 11 degrees, no light, no sound, no human presence of any kind. Time stopped moving there. Outside, a decade passed. Deon's parents grew older. They kept living, and every day they carried the particular weight of not knowing where their son was, not knowing what had happened, not knowing how to grieve something they couldn't locate. Then, in October 2004, Dave Shaw arrived. Dave Shaw, 50, Australian, a commercial airline captain by profession, responsible for hundreds of passengers crossing continents at 35,000 feet. But when he wasn't in a cockpit, he was in a cave. Cave diving wasn't a hobby for him. At the top of a sport already practiced by only a few thousand people worldwide, Dave was the kind of diver other elite divers paused to look at. His regular dive partner was Don Shirley, 48, British South African technical dive instructor. They had worked together for years. Don managed the surface, staged the gas supplies at depth, monitored conditions. He knew every one of Dave's signals. He knew Dave's patterns and decisions. Between them existed the wordless understanding that comes from years of trust in places where words can't travel. In October 2004, Dave descended to 270 meters in Bushman's Hole, a personal record. He reached the bottom, and he found Deon Dreyer. The body was remarkably preserved. Cold, darkness, and total isolation are perfect conditions for what they did to Deon over 10 years. He was there at the bottom, in an almost seated position, still and quiet, like someone sleeping. Except he had been sleeping for a decade. Dave stayed long enough at 270 meters to understand what he was looking at. Then he began his ascent. More than 2 hours of decompression stops. When he finally surfaced, the first thing he did was find a way to reach Deon's parents. He told them, "I'll bring him home." Deon's father, Theo Dreyer, said later that when he received that call, he didn't know what to say. 10 years. 10 years of not knowing, not finding, not being able to grieve properly. And then a stranger calls to say he knows where Deon is and that he's willing to go back. He said it felt like something that had been suspended in midair for 10 years had finally, quietly, come to rest. The recovery dive was set for January 8, 2005. Dave and Don spent 3 months planning. 270 meters is not a depth that tolerates improvisation. Globally, fewer than 10 divers could reliably reach it and return safely. Attempting a body recovery at that depth, working, handling equipment, responding to the unexpected, was another category entirely. At 270 meters, nitrogen acts like a slow anesthetic on the brain. Judgment softens before you notice it's gone. Movements lag, decisions blur, and the most dangerous part, you can't tell. You believe you're still thinking clearly when you're not. Meanwhile, decompression cannot deviate. Ascend too quickly, and the nitrogen dissolved in your blood expands into bubbles inside your body. Paralysis at best, death at worst. Every stop timed to the minute. Dave designed a custom recovery bag. The plan was precise. Descend to 270 meters carrying the bag and its lift cylinder. Locate Dion. Spend no more than 10 minutes securing the body inside. Inflate the bag, let it rise on its own while stage support divers at various depths guided it to the surface. Dave would then begin his own ascent, more than 2 hours of decompression stops, and surface safely. On paper, it was complete. It was achievable. They had rehearsed every step. They had mapped every contingency they could conceive of. There was one thing they couldn't rehearse: what Dion's body, after 10 years in cold darkness, would actually do when disturbed. The evening before the dive, Dion's parents arrived at the site. They had deliberately timed their arrival to be late, after Dave had already finished his preparations. They didn't want him to see them before he went in. They didn't want the weight of their hope to press down on him in his last moments on the surface. It was the last thing they could do for him. January 8th, 2005, 6:13 in the morning. The water at Bushman's hole was still dark. Dave and Don stood at the edge. They shook hands. Neither said much. Years of partnership had made words mostly unnecessary. Dave checked his equipment one final time, adjusted his breathing, looked at Don. Then he said, "I'll be back in 20 minutes. He turned, he entered the water. The darkness took him, the surface settled. Don started the clock. Below, Dave descended through the shaft in controlled layers. Bushman's hole water is unusually clear. His torch cut a cone of light into the black, but beyond that cone was nothing. Support divers were staged at depth, one at 50 meters, others deeper, forming a human chain from surface to deep, waiting for Dave to pass them on his return. An underwater camera mounted to his equipment recorded everything. Approximately 6 minutes after entry, Dave reached 270 meters. The camera caught him arriving at the bottom. His movements were controlled and deliberate. He located Dion. He began working, maneuvering the body toward the bag. Then something went wrong. In 10 years on the cave floor, Dion's body had reached a physical equilibrium with the surrounding water and sediment. When Dave began to move him, gases trapped within the remains began to release. The body started to move and rotate in ways that couldn't be predicted, catching and winding the lines connecting Dave's equipment to the recovery bag. Dave became entangled. At 270 meters, the camera kept running. On the surface, Don waited. 20 minutes, nothing. 30 minutes, nothing. 40 minutes. Don understood that something had gone wrong, but there was no action to take. An unplanned descent to 270 meters, without the preparation and staged gas supplies, was not a rescue. It was a second fatality. Every diver on the support team knew this. They stood at the edge of the water and looked at the calm surface and waited for something they already knew would not come. No one spoke, just wind. Don stayed through the night. 3 days later, Dave's body surfaced with his equipment. The recovery bag surfaced alongside him. Dion was inside. Forensic analysis of the camera footage later reconstructed Dave's final 10 minutes at the bottom. The entanglement gradually compressed his rebreather circuit. Carbon dioxide began accumulating in the closed loop. At 270 meters, with no possibility of outside help and no way to free himself, Dave could only wait. As CO2 levels climbed minute by minute in the dark and the cold, the process lasted approximately 10 minutes. The camera recorded all of it. Dave's family chose not to watch the footage. Dion's father gave an interview afterward. The reporter asked what he would want to say to Dave. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "My son came home. Dave gave me that. All I can do is thank him." Bushman's hole was reclassified after the events of January 2005. New warnings, new assessments, everything about it reconsidered. But the cave is still there. Red desert, bare rock, that unremarkable gap in the ground. Water below, darkness below that, 11-degree cold, and 283 meters of silence below that. 2 fewer people at the bottom now. And somewhere, a recording that no one has decided what to do with. Did Dave know he wasn't coming back? In those 10 minutes, no light, no sound, no one within reach. What did he think about? Did he have regrets? Or did he think it was worth it? Nobody knows. The camera knows, but some answers belong where they were made, down in the dark. 283 meters down, where they can stay.